Okay, today we're going to be dyeing a pair of Xbox 360 thumbsticks with RIT black fabric dye. Other colors might work out alright, but black's the only one I've personally done so far, so that's the only one I can vouch for. What we've got here is a pan of water that has been already mixed with the dye. I use about 1 box of dye for a 2-quart or so pan like this. If you're going to be doing something bigger like dyeing a whole case or larger parts, you would obviously want to increase the amount of dye along with the water so that it stays good and dark. As you can see, I've got a candy thermometer attached to the pan of dye so that we can kind of keep an eye on the temperature. This is optional, but it is a good idea to keep it below boiling. Otherwise, you will end up with black dye splatters all over your kitchen. If you like that look, then go for it. But personally, I kind of would rather not. And also right here we've got just a bowl of clean, cool water. This is for dipping the thumbsticks in between dips in the hot dye. The purpose for this is by dipping them in the cool water, it keeps them from getting too hot and warping. So that is definitely something you want to have on hand. Just as a couple of side notes, it's a good idea. Pick up a pair of gloves. They're cheap. They keep your hands from being dyed whatever color you are dyeing your parts. You always want to wash whatever parts you're dyeing with soap and water. Make sure that there's no grease or oil on them, as that will affect the way that the dye takes to them. I guess it looks like we are pretty much ready to get going here. I'm going to adjust the temperature on that stove a little bit, keep that from getting too hot. What I'm using to dip these thumbsticks in is actually a pair of tweezers. They are spring reverse from normal tweezers. They hold themselves closed. That way I can grab onto a thumbstick and they stay on there pretty well. Whatever you feel like using for this will probably work just as well. This is just what I had handy and what works for me. I guess next step would be, once you get your water up to temperature, which you're probably going to want it between 150 to 200 degrees. Boiling is at 212 and you want to keep it a little below that. So once your water gets up to temp, go ahead, take your clean thumbstick, dip it in the water, and you're going to want to hold it for around 5 seconds or so. Don't let it touch the bottom. Take it out, rinse it in the cool water, and as you can see, it didn't really take a lot of color yet. It's going to take several dips to get it where you want it. So we'll dip it again, just hold it for a few seconds, give it just a gentle shake, rinse it off again, and as you can see here, the black rubber cap on the thumbstick is already starting to take the dye pretty well, but it's going to take quite a number of dips to get the the hard plastic part to where it's dyed a nice rich black color. Another side note too, while I'm going through this, is it's always a good idea to have a couple of paper towels laid out, kind of like what I've got here, that will help keep from getting little drops of dye all over anything that you don't want it on. Obviously be careful when working with a stove. You don't want to put paper towel right next to a hot electric burner, or in this case an open gas flame. Paper does catch fire and it can get pretty interesting if you get it a little too close. Obviously I've never done anything of that sort. Okay, maybe, but that's another story. And just use a little common sense. You are working with some hot dye here. Don't get in a rush. And I mean, as you can see, it's after several dips starting to take the color pretty well. Depending on how hot you've got the dye and the density of the plastic and different things, it can take anywhere from probably 10 dips up to maybe 50 to get this to work out right. Don't try and rush through it and leave it in the dye too long. It will warp the parts. I tried a controller shell as my first thing that I ever dipped, and left it in for about 20 to 30 seconds each time, and after about the third dip the color was starting to look okay, but it was warped just enough that it wouldn't go back together. So spend a few extra minutes, take your time, and end up with something that looks good and works, rather than having a product In the end, that does you no good other than looking like something that Picasso would have created. So yeah, just keep going with this, and before you know it, you'll have yourself a nice set of black Xbox 360 thumbsticks or buttons or whatever you feel like dyeing. Good luck, and if you have any questions, feel free to drop me a message.